I hand this over to you.
He knows that's my absolute favorite thing for him to do. Does this get higher? Okay, it does not. So, forgive me, I'll be looking down a lot because this is not at eye level now. My brother was teasing this morning, and he's like, I've never heard you preach. I'm like, well, I've never heard myself preach either. This is not going to be a sermon per se. I think this is more like a teaching devotion. I do not have the gift of Tim in that I can memorize or see something once, hear something once, and have it memorized. So I will be relying very, very heavily on my notes. So like I said, I apologize. This is not eye level, so I'll be looking down a lot. I'm not trying to be rude. I do have several pictures that I want to share today. So Matt is going to help me cue those up. But before I start, just want to, again, I know Tim said it, but just tell everybody, Happy Mother's Day. If your mom's not here with you today, if your mom's already passed on, or maybe you just didn't have a strong relationship with your mother, find a woman in this congregation. We have so many strong, godly women who have lived such an amazing legacy in Jesus. Are you trying to find me a higher stand? Thank you. That'll be great. Yeah. Much better. Thank you. Thank you. Just take the time to tell them Happy Mother's Day and love on them a little bit. So, Matt, can you put up the photo? Next one, sir. I want to honor my mother and my mother-in-law. And I am grossly pregnant in this picture, you can tell. But it was the most recent picture I could find of me with the two of them. These women are incredible. They are both multi-generational Christian women, both extremely blessed, and I am so honored to stand up here today, and I am because of the legacy that I have from my mother-in-law, Gloria, who Tim said is out preaching today, and then my mom, who has been my Sunday school teacher, my worship leader, everything. She's out there with my baby right now. She, just bragging on her a little bit, is a 3-time cancer survivor. And through all of that, she never quit serving God. She never quit playing. I think she missed one Sunday through all of her years of cancer, including playing the piano. Like, she came up every week and did that. She would always say, if I can just get to church, I'm going to feel okay. And so we would physically dress her, right, Dad? Looking back at my dad, we would get her dressed in the morning. She would come to church, and she would have strength because of God blessing her. She'd get up on the keyboard, continue to play. Amazing. She has an amazing testimony. And then next, I would like to show my beautiful children. And these are my kids, and they made me the mama I am today. So I have 4 kiddos. Ella made me a mom when I was 28 years old. So each of our children, we put a lot of prayer into thought as to what we would name them. We wanted something of significance. So Ella, her real name's Eliana, and that means God has answered my prayer. And God has answered our prayer with that girl. My next oldest is Nathaniel, which means a gift from God. And I know Tim's mentioned it before, but Nate was a miracle in and of himself. He should have died at birth. I was called by the doctor when I was 39 weeks pregnant saying, hey, I need you to come in Monday morning. We're going to induce you. And I'm very, holistic. I don't like medical interventions. I just wanted my babies to come when they came on their own. I'm like, why am I going in to be induced? And they were just like, you just need to come in. So I did. I was asking the nurses, hey, why am I at the hospital? Why am I being induced? I'm not in labor. And they're like, there's nothing on your chart. We don't really know, but we'll ask the doctor when he gets here at 7 a.m. And I'm like, okay. So doctor comes in. He's like, no, I thought you wanted to be induced. I'm like, no, we never had this conversation. I just got a call from the hospital that said show up. So I showed up, and we were there. So I'm like, you know what? We're here. Let's have the baby. Anyway, a few hours later, he was born, and he had such a tight knot in his cord that had I not been induced that day, he may not have even survived another day. So Nathaniel is truly my gift from God. And when he was born, his name was not going to be Nathaniel. But when he was born, I asked him, I'm like, can we change his name? This isn't the name we had planned. We were going to name him after Tim's father. And I said, I just feel like I want to call him Nathaniel, and looked up the name later, and that's what it meant. And then we had a surprise pregnancy. And let me tell you, when you go to the doctor with a surprise pregnancy, and then you have the surprise of them telling you it's twins, if you haven't experienced that before, that's very unique. They I whisper in their ears and I tell them, I said, you have a purpose. You are purposed in life because, like I said, they were just a complete surprise. Nate was only 18 months old when I got pregnant with him. I had the most amazing pregnancy with those two girls. The doctor said that I had a 1% chance for everything to go as well as it did. I carried them to 39 weeks and 3 days, which you don't do that with twins. Perfect delivery, had them. They came so fast that I didn't even have an epidural. They just came out. They were amazing. And both of their names means wisdom of God. So one of them is Sophia and the other one is Elizabeth. We call her Libby. And like Tim said, please pray for sweet Libby. She's just not herself today. It's breaking my heart. But anyway, I just wanted to share a little bit about my kiddos and why I am the mom that I am today. All right, so the title of my message or little devotion, whatever you want to call it, is legacy, but a little play on the word, legaseed, C-E-E-D. We're going to talk about planting seeds in our life. And there are good seeds and bad seeds, so hopefully as we go through this, we'll understand it a little bit more. Matt, if you could put up the next picture. So I'm going to start out looking at 2 Timothy. And in 2 Timothy, Paul is writing a letter to young Timothy, and in that, he recognizes two women. Now, that's not super common to open up a book in the Bible and have it mention two women at the very beginning. Women weren't traditionally recognized at this time. However, Paul says to Timothy, I'm reminded of your sincere faith, which first lived in your grandmother Lois, and now in your mother Eunice, and I am persuaded now lives in you also. So he started this out by recognizing that Timothy had a legacy, a multi-generational legacy of strong women of faith, and he saw that Timothy now possessed that legacy of faith. What a great compliment to a mom. Could you have any more of a sincere compliment than somebody complimenting you on the faith of your children? I mean, I can't. I'm going to give a little example of my sweet girl, Eliana. She was in here 2-3 weeks ago, just asked, Mom, can I be in worship service? And then I'm going to go up to kids ministry afterward. Sure, I wasn't singing that day. I was off. So she and I were sitting in the front, and that sweet baby leaned over to me, and she's like, Mom, I need to go pray with Leslie. And I was like, Leslie? And I don't know, it just wasn't registering. So Leslie Daniel, she's like, yeah, yesterday her little girl, Harmony, almost died. She was in an accident, and it could have been very, very bad. My daughter's telling me this in the middle of worship service. And I was like, oh, okay. And she's like, and I feel like her mom is still just very worried and scared about what happened, and we need to go pray with her. And I was like, okay. And so I said, well, let's go. And then she got real shy. But we walked over. You guys might have seen us from where Tim's sitting. We walked all the way over here to where JD's sitting. And Ella went over to Leslie and prayed for her. And the faith of that baby, I mean, I was very tearful. I mean, for God to move through her and to speak through her in that way. Well, the next day, Leslie sends me a text, and I hope she doesn't mind. She's not in here today. She's in nursery, but forgive me, Leslie, if you mind me sharing this, but I really don't think she will. She sent me a text, and she said, I want to thank you and Ella for being obedient to God and for coming over and praying with me, because little Harmony, the same baby that was had a situation, had another situation happen that day. And Leslie said, had Ella not prayed for her, I believe that something very serious could have happened to her. And I believe that because of her faith and her obedience, Harmony was saved. And I don't know any of the details about what accident Harmony faced or what happened, but I just know that God uses children. So all that to say, what a sincere, great compliment. Mothers, grandmothers, whoever is raising your children, people of the church, have that faith because it is transferred to our children. So something else he says in here, he does not say women of perfect faith. He says women of sincere faith. We as mothers and as believers, we can't have perfect faith. We're humans. We will fail. There's no way we can have a perfect faith. However, we can have a sincere faith. Let me tell you, as a mama of 4 young kiddos, waking up in the morning, I mean, there's some days like, God, do I have enough faith to do what I need to do today? Our lives are just busy right now, a good busy. It's a different routine every day, and we have fun, but it is not a perfect household. full transparency, you walk in my house right now, I wouldn't even let my mom in the house the other day. And it's a joke, really. It's a sad joke. But she knocked on the door, and as soon as you walk in our house, I have a huge dining room table. While doing laundry for 6, I need a really long place to do all my laundry. And so this table's so long, that's where I pile the laundry. And if I get to, sorting it and folding it that day, great. But, if I'm dealing with a sick kid and it's not getting folded, well, that pile just keeps getting higher because I have to keep washing clothes and underwear and nap mats and soccer uniforms, and the pile grows. Let me tell you, perfect moms don't exist. We all have our thing. My thing is a messy home with bad laundry. But all that to say, just be sincere. Be sincere as a mother, as a parent. That's what God wants to see and wants to honor, is your sincerity. So we all have a measure of faith, but it's what we do with that faith. So like I said, we each get up every morning and we might say, do I have enough faith to do what I've been called to do? Do I have enough faith to parent the way I need to? Small faith lived in a big way makes a huge difference in your life. And so this is going to segue into my main point today, which is talking about the mustard seed. So we've heard pretty much all of us as Christians have probably heard about having a faith the size of a mustard seed. So we're going to delve a little bit more into what mustard seed faith looks like. So Jesus, Matt, you can go ahead and put the next slide up, was an absolute master communicator. Not by accident, right? Sorry, can you put, I messed up my order. Can you put the one that says neural coupling? Oh, that one didn't work? Okay, no worries. Okay, you can just leave that up. That's fine. Okay, so I have a background in science. I'm a science nerd, so being true to myself today, I have to bring a little bit of science into this message. I'm a nurse by trade, so health sciences. I have multiple degrees in health sciences. I love it. So recently, scientists have discovered something called neural coupling. I know, nerdy of me. But Jesus used this. We just now have a definition for it. So Jesus uses neural coupling in parables. So a general person talking is going to give data, give points, talk about a message. When I give a message, I'm using one part of my brain. When Connie's receiving the message, she's using a different part of her brain in the back. So you don't retain as much because I'm using one part to deliver, she's using another part to receive. But the cool thing is when you tell stories, both parts are triggered for both parties. You're going to use your front and the back of your brain in telling stories versus just a data dump. You're only going to use one part. So Jesus used stories and used parables, so everything that he taught was extremely relatable. So if we just talk, we're going to remember only about 10% of what was spoken to us 10 days later, versus if we have a visual picture or a story, 10 days later, you might remember 65% of that, or 6 times more likely to remember that. So that's why Jesus used parables, because in his infinite wisdom, he knew that we would understand more of a story versus just telling data or just input. So not only did Jesus use stories, he used everyday things that are tangible. So he uses a lot of agriculture in his stories and his parables that we're about to get into with the mustard seed, because what would the majority of the people do then? They were farmers, right? They had agriculture. They depended on it to work. So when Jesus would tell a story about how soft is your heart, do you have a soft soil heart? Is your heart rocky? Is your heart hard dirt? Well, what's going to happen next time in your garden digging? You're probably going to remember that he was talking about soil because it's now relatable to you. So that's what I'm going to try to do today, is be a little bit relatable with the story of the mustard seed, and we're going to use a few different things, a few different ideas. That's why I had you guys grab the note cards, because we're going to put different parts of learning into this sermon. Rachel, how many parts? I'm looking at my teacher over here. All the different learning styles, right? We're going to try to touch on a few of them. Okay, so let me make sure I covered everything I wanted to say on that. Yep. Okay, so I'm going to tell a little story now. So this up here, if you guys didn't already guess, this is mustard seed, or this is a mustard plant. There's different variations of mustard plants. This happens to be the bush variety, which is probably the type that was talked about in this parable that we're about to read, was the bush variety versus the tree variety, and there are mustard trees too. So in studying for this, I was listening to a pastor talking about the mustard seed, and he gave a story I would like to share. So he went to Israel, and when he was there, he saw the mustard seed. and he's really into botany and agriculture, and he collected a bunch of different soils and dirts for his studies all throughout Israel. He was flying back to the States. He went through customs, and he had to declare that he had soil and seeds. So no issue leaving Israel. He gets back to the States, and the customs officer was like, "Sir, I see that you checked soil. What do you have?" And he explained, "I have XYZ soil from Israel. I also have some mustard seeds." Customs said, "You have to throw it away. Can't come into the States." He said, "I promise, I promise, I promise. This is just because I'm a pastor. I use these as illustrations in my sermons. I'm going to take it home, put it in a glass bottle, put a cork on it. It will never touch our soil here in America. It will never leave this glass bottle." And the customs officer gave him a hard time, and he was like, "You know what? That's fine. You can take the soil home." And he's like, "Oh, thank you." And he said then, "But you cannot let the mustard seed into this country." And he's like, "Fair enough. I'm happy that you let me keep what I kept, but why not the mustard seed?" And the customs officer said, this guy was from the Tennessee area. He said, "If that touches our soil here, it's going to take off like wildfire. We will not be able to contain it. That mustard seed plant will grow to full maturity in about 90 days, meaning it can then reproduce itself. It's going to take off like wildfire." So while we're going through the story, through the parable, think about that. A mustard seed is not something that you just plant and it just grows slow and it's extremely self-contained. It will take over hillsides. It will take over. So when we talk about the faith of a mustard seed, think that that has the potential to take off like a wildfire in my life or around those that I touch. So the mustard seed parable does show up in all three of the synoptic gospels, which are Matthew, Mark, and Luke. However, today we're going to look specifically at Matthew 13, 31 through 32. So you can go ahead and put that up, Matt. That's the paraphrased version. I'm going to read the full version. So he being Jesus, told them another parable. "The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, which a man took and planted in his field. Though it is the smallest of all seeds, yet when it grows, it is the largest of garden plants and becomes a tree, so that the birds come and perch in its branches." So around this time, Jesus is coming. Let me backtrack. So right before this parable, Jesus had just given a parable about the kingdom of heaven. So kingdom of heaven, and then now he's talking about the mustard seed and saying that the mustard seed is like the kingdom of heaven. So Jesus is now on earth. He's now beginning his ministry. The Jews are looking for a Messiah, right? But the Romans are in control. So the Jews are looking for this guy who's going to come and help and conquer all the Romans, defeat them. And Jesus is like, I'm not that king. I am the king, but I am not a king who's here to set up an army to defeat the Romans. This king who came is talking about mustard seeds, talking about love, talking about forgiveness. And the Jews are like, what is happening? Our Jesus doesn't preach the war that they were looking for. It wasn't going to be this huge conqueror that they were looking for. But Jesus says, "My kingdom is like a mustard seed." So the mustard seed might seem small and insignificant, but don't for a minute doubt that God isn't doing spectacular underneath the surface of that seed. It roots and it spreads like crazy. Matt, next picture, please. So here's an idea of how small this little seed is and the tree behind it that it can produce. So you guys now see the tree and the bush. We don't know which variety the scripture was talking about, possibly different varieties within the three different gospels. So Jesus is asking us to adopt a mustard seed mentality. So what does that mean? It means that just because something is small and seemingly insignificant doesn't mean that it won't germinate or develop into something large. Just because we can't see that something is happening doesn't mean that something isn't actually happening. We can't see when the seed takes root. Things are brewing and germinating and growing under the surface. So another little story here. I love classical music. Matt, you can go ahead and put the next one up. My dad used to play it for us all the time growing up. In fact, we would be in the car and he would quiz us, like, what instrument is that playing? This one time, Amber, sitting back here, that's my cousin. She was with my dad and I, and Dad was taking us to Hurricane Harbor, Wet and Wild back in the day, right? And I remember Dad was playing classical music, and Amber was like, "What is this crap on the radio? This is horrible." And my dad's like, Amber, listen to it. It's going to culture you. It's great. And Amber's like, Uncle Joby, this is horrible. Turn on, whatever. And Dad's like, the only two things that play in this car are KLTY or classical music, nothing else. And Amber's like, oh, she's a teenager. She's like, oh my gosh. Anyway, so Dad used to quiz us. We had fun. That was a legacy that my dad gave me. I now love classical music. I play it for my children, and I find myself doing the same thing my dad did. Ella, what instrument is that? Oh, it's a violin, Mom. Good job. So we're going to talk about Beethoven for a quick second, just hopefully tie a little analogy into this. So when Beethoven was in his mid-20s, he started going deaf. And we all hopefully have heard of Beethoven. He's a very famous composer, really, really well known. So he was fully deaf by the time he hit his 40s. However, he continued to compose music in his silence, in his deafness. So he never heard some of his greatest masterpieces. He never knew what they sounded like. He would stand in, great symphony halls, and he would just feel the vibration of the music and the vibration of the applause through the audience. And he only heard it in his head. So with that, let that sink in for a second. Are we questioning God? Is what I'm doing working? Is this seemingly small thing actually working? Or are we thinking, oh God, what are you saying to me? I'm in the dark. I'm in silence. I can't hear what you're saying. I don't know if what I'm doing is working. I don't know if this little small seed of faith has any impact. Is it making any difference? I feel like I'm composing in the silence. But you have to trust that in these small acts, that God will have a big impact. What is your small mustard seed? Is it a little piece of faith that God's asking you to grow? Is it finances? Is it marriage? Is it children? You may not see any difference of what's happening, but God is working in the silence. Matt, you can put the next one up, and this is the last picture. So what's germinating? What's working? Mom, Dad, parents, is what you're planting into your children working? Are you leaving that legacy seed? Or is it falling onto deaf ears and landing on soft soil? There are times when we don't see the impact for years, or possibly even this side of heaven, but don't for a minute think that God isn't working. Don't make the mustard seed mistake thinking that because something is small, it isn't going anywhere. The word of encouragement I want you to keep in mind today is to keep at it. Remain faithful to Jesus and be faithful with the little things that he's entrusted you with. It might be easy to get discouraged when you don't see big results, but if we're faithful in the little things every day, in parenting, in work, in loving a spouse, a sibling, in your finances, what about that ministry that God placed on your heart when you were a small child or a young believer that you thought, I'm not going anywhere with that, and you just let it fall by the wayside? Are you being faithful in that? If you believe that you're doing what God has called you to do and you aren't seeing the impact you think you should be seeing, continue to be faithful. Continue to germinate that mustard seed because you have no idea what God's doing under the soil. A legacy of faithfulness is born out of small repeated acts. These daily faithful acts add up over time. So on the contrary, so we know, yes, let's keep that seed planted, let's keep it germinating. But what about this mentality of a mustard seed? Can that have a negative impact in our life? So the mustard seed can give us a sense of encouragement, but the mustard seed can also give us a word of warning. What small seeds are you planting? Because we already know that these small seeds can have a big impact in a legacy, but something small or negative can grow into something very dangerous. Something small, you might think, it's just one modification on my tax form. It's just one drink every day. It's just one Instagram account I'm following. It's just one Netflix series. It's just one harmless text. These seemingly small seeds can have big negative reactions. And we know what they are. The Spirit nudges us and convicts us. But by doing these small things repeatedly, we begin to think that it's not that big of a deal because now they're part of our life and they have taken root into our daily life. What initially was cautionary has now become common. And this can lead to bad habits, bad choices, or compromises that build up over time. If you find yourself engaged in a mustard seed situation that is heading for danger, then pray that you no longer deceive yourself and believe the lie that something small isn't germinating or developing into something devastating. Bring it before God and ask him to address it. Remember 2,000 years ago, God invited his audience into a mustard seed mentality. He's doing that still today. That something small can become something very big, both good, both bad. Both have the potential to leave a legacy to your children, to your family, to your workplace, to your church. And both can impact your relationship with the King. All right, so I know I'm much faster than my husband. We're going to change service. Music team, you guys can go ahead and go up. If you guys, I'm going to ask 100% of involvement in this. I know this is something very different. We've never really done this before to my knowledge. But I'm going to ask that everybody take those cards that you got. If you didn't get one, you're not going to distract us. Go back and grab one. There's some pins back there if you need one. The colored part's an envelope. The white part is a card, so grab one of each. I'll wait a second while they do that. So what I want you to do with these cards is I want you to write something on it. And I'm going to keep talking, but just give you some things to think about. Write something on this card. Do you have a negative seed that's planted that you need to uproot? Write that down. It's going to be a physical reminder and a commitment to God because you were putting that into writing. Or what about that small ministry that God placed on your heart years ago? Or what's that small seed that God is calling you to take care of and to plant and to reproduce and to have spread? Write that down. It doesn't have to be positive. You don't have to pick positive or negative, just whatever is resonating with you today. After you guys write those down on the cards, I'm going to ask that you all come up and place them. It's okay. I was going to bring that cross down here and have you guys lay it under the cross, but it's okay. So just pretend the cross is here, but I want you to just physically lay it up here. I promise I'll throw these away when we're done, so if you write something personal on it, it's okay. Nobody's going to read it, including myself. I will personally promise that I shred these. But if it's something you want back, you can just write your name on the front and then come pick it up afterward. That's fine too. Or grab a clean card in the back when we're done. But I'm asking 100% participation to actually write something down because we all have a seed in our life. What is that seed that we either need to germinate to develop or that seed that we need to uproot? What is that? And we're going to place that at the cross of Jesus because he is our King and he is going to help us get there. Guys, you can go ahead and start. And as they're singing, if you would bring that card up. And I'm going to hand it back over to Tim. You want to trade off? I'll take the baby.